Again, thank you for attending today. Just want to point out that this system is new. We're replacing a 30-year-old process based on paper. So this is a work in progress. If you find you have frustrations or suggestions on how we can improve it, please send them along to us so we can address them and improve your experience as well as others using FOResT. This has been a year and a half process now, I think, since we started developing this. And we're still, as I said, we're still making tweaks to it, and we'll continue to do them. I want to thank the team that was involved in developing this. It includes Stephen Nicholas, Adam Cates, Greg Miller, George Harris, Joe Mintz, Don Mancius, Morton Mosswild, and Dan Jacobs. And let me stop sharing now. And what we're going to do this morning is Dan Jacobs is going to do an overview of the whole process, just to give you a kind of a feel of what's going on with it. And then we'll take a short, probably 10-minute break, and I will do a in-depth demo of FOResT and go over setting up an account as well as how to create a notification in FOResT. So with that, Dan, if you're ready, you can jump in here.
Okay, can you hear me, Greg?
I can, yep.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Yep, just make sure it's your desktop.
I wrote that down. Yeah, I'm all set on that one, I think.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Let's see here. Does that appear to be working, Greg?
Yeah, I can see the first slide there.
And you think it's going to record?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. All right, so as Greg mentioned, my name's Dan Jacobs. I'm a district forester, and my office is Island Falls. I cover primarily southern Aroostook County, and I'm going to do the overview presentation for FOResT, the FOResT online resource tool. The presentation should take 45 minutes or less, depending on questions. And I think you can either, Greg mentioned, raise your hand or enter questions in the chat box, and I'll answer them as we go or at the end. Greg is going to be doing a demo, as he mentioned, is the second half of today's webinar, and he's going to really get into the nuts and bolts. So I think the presentation that I do will give you a little bit of an introduction, and then a lot of your questions will probably get answered through the demo that Greg does. One last thing I want to say before we get going is a lot of times I use the term FON, F-O-N, and by that I just mean the FOResT operations notification. So FON and notification would be interchangeable throughout this presentation. This slide here gives a general idea of the topics I'm going to cover today. Again, this is an overview presentation. The in-depth discussion and demo will be Greg's portion in the second half. So the first topic I'm going to hit is a little bit of the history and rationale behind the notifications and the development of FOResT. I'll give a little bit of an overview on the functions and the basic setup of FOResT. We will briefly walk through the process, do sort of an example of how to create a notification. And then we'll talk a little bit about the timeline, which this won't be a long discussion. This should only take a couple minutes, the timeline for the rollout. And if you need more information or feel like you missed something today, there's going to be 2 more webinars this month, I believe March 17th and March 31st. So if you're still unsure about the system or want to watch another webinar, you can. The history of the notification process goes back to 1989 with the Forest Practices Act, and the passage of that. The earliest FON that I have seen, or notification that I have seen, is dated 1991. So I'm guessing the system probably actually went into effect in maybe 1990 or 91 sometime. For the past 30 or so years, we have been using paper for this system. So essentially everybody that is conducting a harvest operation is required to submit a notification to the state. There are some exemptions to this requirement that you can look up in Maine Forest Service Rule Chapter 26. But for the past 30 plus years, this process has been done on paper. Any changes to the harvest, the amendment process has been on paper, and the required year-end landowner reports have been on paper. So we've been dealing with a lot of paper over the past 30 years. Believe me, I'm a fan of paper. I still like my paper field notebook and my paper tally sheets, but it's time to get into the 21st century and start doing some of this online, and that's what we're doing here. That 30 years has not only generated a lot of paper and the need to archive a lot of information in storage boxes, but we've had to enter all that data into a computer system manually, which is a lot of manpower and time. And there's also been a lot of postage going back and forth for everybody, the Forest Service and everybody involved. So this process hopefully will streamline things. The system will streamline things and make things hopefully quicker and better for everybody. And because I like paper, I've been pretty critical of this system, and I think it has a lot of things going for it. There's still some things that need to be addressed, but I think the system's really going to work nicely for people. So as far as the notification rules, these are found in Maine Forest Service Rule Chapter 26. There's a link on the bottom of this slide to get to the Chapter 26 rules. They can also be found on the Forest Service website and the Secretary of State website. But in a general sense, everybody that's harvesting has to fill out notification with a few exemptions. Each notification form, the current paper form, has a 6-digit number on it. And that number, by law or rule, needs to be posted at the principal yard for a harvest or the main access point to multiple yards. This number is also used on items like trip tickets and mill scale slips to identify the harvest of origin. So there are some things that the notification is required by law. And if you need more information on this, you should look at Chapter 26 rules. And as far as rules go, those are only a few pages long, so it doesn't take much time to scan those, go through them. So as I've already mentioned, FOResT is an online notification system, and it will be also used for doing landowner reports. I told you that FON stands for Forest Operations Notification already, and I will probably use FON multiple times throughout this presentation. Eventually, the paper form is planned to go away. The timeline on that is a little bit uncertain at this time. And I'll talk about that in a little while. But as Greg mentioned, this system has been under development now for about 18 months. They had a pretty serious team working on this from the Forest Service. Greg was the project lead, but we also had folks from the private sector testing the product in a demo version as we went along with development. So we have had outside input on the process. I should mention that I only got involved on the team back last late fall when we started doing these presentations. I did some of the work with the demo, and I've been helping with the presentations, but I did very little to help with the development of the product. If anybody has any questions, you should ask. We anticipate there's going to be some questions. We anticipate that you're going to have some comments on things that can be improved. And we've already had quite a lot of people submit questions and comments, and we're working on some improvements as we speak. So we do want feedback. These are some of the key features of the FOResT system. As I've already mentioned, this is an online web-based user system. One nice thing about this to keep in mind is that it follows the paper form very closely. So the structure of this system is set up very similarly to what you've already been doing for years with paper. Questions are very similar, if not identical to the questions in the paper form, with a few minor changes. So it should be pretty intuitive to use this system. Every person who uses this system and everybody who is put on a FON, to complete the process, everybody has to have an online account. And we're going to talk about that in some detail throughout the morning. There is a digital mapping piece to this system, and I find the digital mapping component to be really user-friendly and one of the best features of the whole system. We'll talk about that in a little bit of detail in a minute. The system is step-by-step, and I think the process and the fact that it is step-by-step is going to eliminate some of the problems we've had in the past with incomplete notifications. We'll talk about this some more, but essentially what happens is you have to complete the step you're working on before moving to the next step in the process. And I think that's going to solve a lot of problems with missing information and incomplete notifications. So it's a pretty simple step-by-step process. Digital signatures are involved. Everybody is notified who's on the notification, who's listed on the notification, when it is complete and accepted. And then there's going to also be a landowner report component of the system that will start next fall or winter. This here is the home page for FOResT. So to get to the FOResT page, if you are on the main Forest Service homepage, there is a link or a button to click in the upper right on the homepage for main Forest Service, and it will take you to the FOResT page. On the FOResT page, there's a ton of information, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. But there's also a button on the FOResT page to enter the FOResT system. And once you've clicked on that, you will end up here at this screenshot that we're looking at right now. And the two things I want to point out with this is the first thing that you're going to see when you enter FOResT is you're going to have the ability to either sign in, which is that button in the upper right of the screen. And that's for people that already have created an account. If you have not created an account, there's a button in the lower right to do that. So everybody is going to have an account that uses this system. So this is a list of some of the basic functions, and it sort of, in a way, goes through the process of creating a notification in a real simple bullet point type of outline. So obviously, I've already mentioned that everybody has to have an account, and it's pretty easy to set up an account. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. If you have an account, you can sign in. And when you sign in, you'll have the ability to start a new notification. And as you'll see, you'll also have the ability to work with other notifications that are already in the system, either in a draft form or active notifications. At least you can view all these, if not work with them. Once you have started a new notification, one of the first things that you need to do is identify your role. and also the other parties that are involved with the notification. So you have to be, we'll talk about this in a moment too, you have to be either a landowner or a designated agent to be a notifier. And that doesn't mean that you can't also be the forester or the harvester. You can have multiple roles, but the person creating the notification has to either be the landowner or designated agent. Once you've completed this step, you'll move into the digital mapping of your harvest location and the different activities. You can always save a draft of the notification and come back and fill in bits and pieces at a later time and complete the notification at a later time. Once you have signed and certified a notification as complete, then it goes into a pending form. And at this point, it cannot be edited. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And like I've mentioned, within this system, you can view notifications that are in draft form, that are pending, that are active, and that are inactive. And we'll show a little bit of that in just a moment. When you click the Create an Account button, these are some screenshots of what you're going to see. And I'm sorry I'm not showing you the full screen. Greg will show you the full screen when he does the live demo. So just keep in mind you're only seeing little pieces of the screen. So to create an account, click the Create Account button, which is on the FOResT homepage or the starting page for FOResT. You will create an account similarly to creating any other online account. You have to enter your contact information. You will need a email address, and you will need to create a password. But if you can create an account for Cabela's, you can create an account for FOResT. And so the key pieces, once you've done this, you're going to have your email address available and your password available to be able to access your account. And once you've created the account, you will be issued a FOResT ID number. And we will talk in a little bit of detail about the FOResT ID number in just a minute. Okay, so this is the sign-in process, which is pretty simple, pretty intuitive. When you're on the FOResT homepage, the sign-in button is in the upper right. Click on that. As I've already mentioned, you will need your email address and your password. Click Sign In, and you will be taken to the dashboard. And the dashboard is the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the features of the dashboard and how to start the creation process for notification. Okay, so there's a few different things I want to point out on this dashboard. Once you've signed in, you're going to be taken to the dashboard. And there's a number of different things that are circled here, and I can't remember what order they're in. So from the dashboard, you can create a notification. And that button that is circled is what you'll click if you want to start a new notification. I'll point out that there's some other screens that are embedded within this dashboard that show both pending and active notifications. And in the pending notification box, you can see notifications that have been certified, but they are waiting for final certification by other folks that are listed on the notification. So because this is still pending, it's not gone through the entire process, you will see that it does not have a notification number assigned. And this is something that I probably haven't mentioned yet, but the one difference between the old paper form and the new system is that the notification number will not be issued until the notification has been complete and accepted. And the number is going to now be a 7-digit number, as opposed to the old paper system. It was a 6-digit number, and it was pre-printed on the notification form. So the number in this system will be issued when everything is completed and certified, and it will be a 7-digit number. You can also see your active notifications down in the lower box, and the active notifications have been circled. You can see that active notifications have a notification number assigned, and it's a 7-digit number. There is the ability, if you look off to the right, if you can see my cursor, you can click the view button and you can access these notifications. Now, the only notifications that you can make edits in are ones that are saved in a draft status. Pending notifications and active notifications can be viewed but not edited. And for all the screens in FOResT, your FOResT ID number will show in the upper right corner of the screen. So I guess I like to look at this dashboard as a nice overview of all the activity that is going on inside your account. So it's a nice starting place. It's a good way to get a feel for what's going on, what you have pending or active or in draft form. So we'll start the create a notification process in just a minute and kind of run through a little example. But as I mentioned before, who can create a notification? At this point, it is only the landowner or designated agent that can be the notifier. So notifier means the person that is creating the notification. The landowner or the designated agent could also be a licensed forester or the harvester, but only a landowner or designated agent can create a notification and be a notifier. So now we'll just work through the process of creating a new notification. And if anything is not clear as I do this, feel free to ask questions, but also keep in mind that Greg is going to go through this step by step in a live demo in the next segment. So as I mentioned before, the first step once you've signed into your account is to create a notification and click the Create Notification button. That will take you, as I mentioned, to the first step in the process. And down below in this slide, you can see that there is, it looks like kind of a timeline, starting with that overview, which is to the right of Save Draft. And on that line is listed all the different steps in the process. And I'll go through right now a real super brief overview of these steps, and then we're going to talk about each one individually to give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect when you're working in the system. So the overview, that's where you start when you create a notification and you identify your role in the harvest and enter some basic information. Once you've completed that, you'll move on to the digital mapping. And that, as I explained, this is pretty user-friendly and it has some pretty nice features associated with it. Then you'll move into the activity details. And these are the sort of specific questions like, is this property in tree growth that you're going to have to answer? And we'll look at that in some detail in just a moment. The contacts, this is where you list all the other parties that are part of this notification and this harvest. And you're going to do that using their last name and their FOResT ID number. So that FOResT ID number becomes a pretty important piece as you work through this process. The last step in the process is the review of the summary details. So you're going to review the information that you've put in FOResT, certify that it's correct. And once you've gone through that process, all the other parties will need to certify their involvement and that the information is correct. And once everything's done, you will be issued your notification number. So this is just sort of a little bit of a redundant slide. It shows the process again, this arrow moving to the moving downward, pointing downward on the left side of the screen, shows how you move through the process step by step. And as I've mentioned before a couple times, you can't proceed from one step to the next step until the step you're working on has been completed. You can always move back if you want to make changes or edits. You just can't jump ahead. Okay, so the first step in the process when you are creating a new notification is the overview page. This shows a little screenshot of part of the overview page. Pretty simple. You identify your role in the harvest. In this example that we're working through right now, I have identified myself as the designated agent. Maybe I've also identified myself as a licensed forester too, but I can't see that part of the screen. So I'm the designated agent. You will also list the start date of your operation. By default, you will be given the 2-year maximum time frame. So if this is going to start November 3rd, 2020, then it's going to end November 3rd, 2022 automatically. The property details that you enter in this step are the same as you've entered in the past. The town name, the nearest road, and the parcel acreage. And once you've completed all that, you can see that these all have little red asterisks next to them, the questions, and that means that each one of those is required. And once you've filled those in, you can move to step 2. Step 2 is the mapping step. And this is a really nice feature, I think. It's probably my favorite part of the whole process because it's easy. And I like easy stuff on the computer. You've already entered the town that your harvest operation is going to occur in the overview page. So one of the really cool things now is the map, when you get to the map stage, is going to be centered on that town. So that makes it really easy. You don't have to search around for your town. The other nice thing about this is that you move around in the map and you zoom in and out, kind of how you do with Google Maps or Google Earth. So if you've used those before, then you should have a good understanding of how to move around with these maps. The other nice feature here is that you can switch your background from topographic to aerial imagery. And Greg is going to show you how to do that. It's pretty simple. You will also see, depending on what town you're in, for towns that are either statewide standards or LUPC towns, the zoning will show up. But I have to point out that you have to zoom in to a certain level before the zoning will appear. So I think that this town, I see some streams, but it looks like there's no buffers on them. So this must be a non-statewide standards town. It looks like over here, this might be a statewide standards town with a stream that has a 75-foot wide buffer. Greg, can you see my cursor? No, Greg. All right.
Nope. Yeah, I can.
You can see the cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe where the cursor is, that this is maybe a 75-foot zone on a stream in a statewide standards town. So all good features that you'll find in this mapping piece. All the mapping is done by dropping points. At least that's how I've heard it described before. You'll create polygons for your harvest area, and that's just by dropping points, and dots or points are automatically connected to create polygons. This has an acreage calculator associated with it. You'll make line segments for roads, and this will again be done by dropping points. The dots will automatically connect. If you are doing any water crossings, you can drop points for these. You can have multiple harvest areas within the same town, but you can't have multiple towns on the same notification. So it's the same thing as has been done for the past 30 years. Each town needs a separate notification. This screenshot here shows a harvest area, and I'll just go through some of the steps in creating some of the features that are required. So you can see that there's buttons here for, here's my cursor, harvest, road construction, and water crossing. So you click on those to start creating those features on the map. And it's really pretty simple. When you click on one of those buttons, you are going to get a little instruction window that will tell you how to create that particular feature. So in this case, it's giving you some instructions on how to create the road segments that you want to add to your map. And as you can see here, the road length has been calculated and shows up on the map. Trying to go back a little bit. Okay, this is where I want to be. So once you have created your harvest polygon, you can see that the size of the polygon or the acreage has been calculated, and you can, until you save that, you can edit it. You can make changes. But once you have saved it, you can't change it. You can only delete it and start over again. And here's a delete button on the right-hand side. With your water crossings, you're going to need to indicate whether they're permanent or temporary, and whether they're on a skid trail or road. Now, the way that you answer these questions and the activities that you draw on the map, those are going to impact the next step in this process. So the next step in the process is going to be based on your mapping to some extent. Let me just look at my notes and see if I've covered everything. Okay, move ahead. So the activity details step in the process. Again, this is based to some extent on the mapping that you've done in the previous step. And so certain things are going to be asked, certain questions are going to be asked based on the map. Certain questions are asked of everybody, no matter how you've done the map. Like, is this lot in tree growth? Or is this a change of use? One thing I need to point out is that the change of use question has been changed a little bit. If you are doing a change of use, you don't manually enter what you're changing it to. There's a drop-down menu, and you will select from categories. So you don't have to be quite as specific as you have in the past, at least some people have. So if you are converting FOResT to potatoes or to blueberries, you don't have to indicate that. There is just a selection in the menu for agriculture. If you indicated that you're going to be doing road construction in, say, a LUPC town, there's going to be some things, questions asked in that regard. If you are doing a water crossing, there may be some questions or reminders related to the water crossing. And again, you can't move from one page to the next or one step from the next to the next unless what you're working on has been complete. So for instance, I just wanted to mention, I looked at my notes and I saw statewide standards. So if you're working in a statewide standards town, there is the likelihood that you're going to have some questions that are specific to statewide standards that appear. Similarly, if you're working in a LUPC town. And this just shows a screenshot of some of the questions you'll be asked. And again, I've reviewed some of these questions like the standard tree growth question, the standard change of use. If you answer yes to the change of use question, you will get the menu. So that's basically what you can expect in the activity details step. Moving on to the contacts step. Now, this notification example that we've been working on, I identified myself, or whoever created this presentation identified themselves as the designated agent. So that information is already in there because we've already signed into the account and identified ourselves as the agent. So now we need to make sure that everybody else that is a part of this harvest is identified. And the important thing to know is that to put somebody on the notification, you're going to need to have their last name and FOResT ID number. And so that's going to require some upfront communication. And the thing about this is it may take some time to get used to, but I think what is going to happen is this process, people are going to find that it is very fast and efficient once people are used to it and have accounts set up. So in the past, I've talked to a lot of loggers that maybe they're mailing a notification to Florida, get signed. So I don't even want to deal with the post office these days. Now everything is super fast, done through email with this system. So I really think that this system is going to be very helpful to a lot of people. Folks are going to find it's a very good system. And yeah, I guess be careful with who you share your FOResT ID number with, because you don't want to be identified on a whole lot of harvests that you have no intention of being involved with. This is the, I think now I'm going to have a few different screenshots of the information that you enter in the contacts page. So I was listed as a designated agent, and now the landowner information is required. It has the little red asterisk here. Have to have a landowner on a notification. You need to enter the landowner's last name. You need to enter the landowner's FOResT ID. The other questions that are specific to the landowner is the number of acres owned in Maine, and that is now a range that you can select from. And this, I believe, is a new question, and I think this was taken from the landowner reports, and this is ownership type. So identify the type of ownership. And once you've done all that, you click the Find Landowner button. So just entering the last name and the FOResT ID will not populate all the other information. You have to click Find Landowner to finish entering the information for landowner. And once you've done that, everything has been done properly, you have the right FOResT ID number, you're going to see something like this. The designated agent information has already been entered because the designated agent was the notifier. Today I'm pretending to be Morton Mosswild. That's okay, he's a pretty good guy. So here you can also see the harvester information that's required, another red asterisk. We've always required that the harvester be listed on the notification and sign the notification. So again, enter the last name, enter the harvester's FOResT ID number, and you have to click this button, Find Harvester Operator, and then the information will populate at that point. And this is just another slide on that same thing. You need to enter that FOResT ID number. So in this case, maybe Morton entered the last name, but did not enter the harvester FOResT ID, and that's required, so it wouldn't populate with the information. All right, so this is probably the most complicated section for me to go through because it is quite a few different screenshots, and for me, it's a little bit complex. Hopefully I can make it simpler for everybody who's looking. But the last step in the process is the summary and certification step. And the basics of this is you're going to review all of the information that you've entered in each of the steps. You're going to certify that that information is correct. And once you've completed the certification process, everybody else who is associated with the harvest, who is on the notification, will get an email and they'll be asked to certify. Once all the parties have certified, the notification is going to be complete and a FON number is generated, which is going to be 7 digits, and it will be emailed to all the parties involved. So I'll just show a few of the screenshots, starting with the first page in the summary. So just so everybody is aware, this is not a slide or part of the slide, but I just want to tell you what order the information is going to come at. So each piece of information has got to be certified as correct. You're first going to review the contacts, then the overview, then the map, the activity details. You're going to be given the main Forest Service contacts, which would be the district forester and forest health. And then you're going to be given some important reminders. And you're going to have to, each one of those 6 pieces, you're going to have to check a box to certify. So right now we're looking at the contact information, and you can see that this is right now in a draft form. So nothing has been certified. While it's still in a draft form, we have the opportunity to go back and make changes. Once everything's been certified, the notification will be in a pending form, and you cannot go back and make changes. Okay, so after we have certified the contact information is correct, we will review the overview information. And there's a little box here. In the slideshow, it says mark as read. In the live version of FOResT, this is going to read certify as correct. And you're going to check that box if it's correct. We're kind of skipping around here now. And this is a list of some of the important reminders that are specifically associated to this harvest. So at the top, you see these little check marks, and these are general reminders for you that if most people have been involved with a harvest before, they're going to know this, but these are good things to keep in mind. The only item in this harvest that required a significant reminder specific to the harvest is the possible need for a permit by rule under water crossings. So review all the reminders, and then again, if once you've reviewed those and understand them, you certify as correct. Once you've certified all 6 summary pieces as correct, this final certify button will become active. So it's gray right now. When you've checked off all these boxes for the 6 different pieces, that will become active and turn a darker color. And here it is. We've checked all our boxes. In reality, I believe it's 6 boxes that you need to check. And then once you've checked all those boxes, you will click the certified button. So there's still a little bit more before we've completed this process. Depending on who you are in terms of your part in the harvest, landowner, designated agent, harvester, forester, you're going to have some statements that you have to read and check that you acknowledge and certify those. This one is designated agent. That's the example that we're working on. Once you've checked all those boxes, you will acknowledge and certify. And once you acknowledge and certify, then your notification has been completed and certified, and it's in a pending form. It is now waiting for all the other people listed on the notification to certify their involvement. And like I said, this is in a pending status now because it has been certified by the notifier. And once it's in pending status, there is no opportunity to go back and make edits, but you can withdraw that notification. And I believe Greg Lord will go through that process when he does his demo. So now, once the notifier has gone through the entire process of the certification, an email is going to be sent to everybody else that is listed on the notification. That email is going to have a link for them to click so that they can certify their involvement in the notification. I'll show you that email in the next slide. Once everybody has signed notification, then the notification is finally complete and active. And a 7-digit number will be sent to everybody who's associated with the harvest. There will also be an opportunity at this point to print the posting page, which has the 7-digit number on it. And this is the page, I think it was either attached to the notification form or you would get that in the mail. I can't remember which it was, one way or the other when it was paper. In this case, you'll be able to print it off your printer. At this point, I believe this is the only thing that you can easily print from FOResT. So I have been asked that question before, if the summary pages can be printed, and I don't believe so, but Greg can speak to that when he does his talk. This is a copy of the email that's sent out. In this example, this is sent to the landowner because the designated agent was the notifier. And this is just explaining that a notification has been submitted and is pending. And there is a link at the bottom for Fred Lord, the landowner, to certify his involvement with this notification. So that's a pretty simple process that will enable Fred to go in, review the information, and certify that it is correct and acceptable. The timeline, this will be a pretty short discussion. FOResT was scheduled to go live January 1st. It has gone live. I know that there have been a number of people that have been submitting notifications through this system already. Paper notifications are still being accepted for the time being. If you use or have used a paper notification and it's still active, you will get a paper year-end report form to complete. And at some point, it's expected that the paper notifications will go away. We're still working through a process for people that don't have computer access. And until that's developed, I believe the paper font will still be accepted. But expect that the paper notification form will be going away in the near future. I mentioned early on in the overview presentation that the FOResT homepage has a ton of great information. In fact, this webinar is going to be recorded and posted on that web page. So there is all the past or most of the past webinars are on that web page. There's also how-to videos. There's a question and answer page on there and a ton of useful information. There's also an email link. If you need to ask a specific question, you can do so using that email link, or you can call the number of the office in Augusta, which is 287-2791. Usually the person that answers the phone is one of the people that was on the FOResT team from the beginning. Most likely Steve Nicholas will be the one answering the phone, and he knows as much about FOResT as anyone. He will be a great resource if you need to call the Augusta office. So that is the overview presentation. If you have any questions, we can try to answer those. Thank you.